everyone, and welcome to another episode of Breaking Into Cybersecurity. Today we have another amazing guest with us, Jeff Barron. He's going to share his journey coming from an event promoter to offensive security. So this is definitely an interesting story. So let's bring Jeff on the stage and he could share more about your background. So why event promoting? Let's talk about that.
Sure. I mean, it's a long time ago. You have to go back to the 90s rave scene. It's a very iconic part of our history, really. If you've ever seen like the Jinkos and pictures of that time, very different time, right? A lot of fun. So when I first went to one, my very first one, I thought, I want to do one of these. I want to put one of these events together. I think I was 18, 19 years old. And so I did. And I got really heavily involved in that scene, and it was a lot of fun.
Okay. And then so you're in the event promoter scene, like how did you transition to cybersecurity? Did you like technology? Like what aspect of that?
Sure. I always had, honestly. I started coding when I was 9 years old.
Okay.
I mean, very basic stuff, literally applesauce basic. Print, I am cool, go to 10, that kind of stuff, really simple stuff. Then later I got into the ANSI art scene when I was about 14 or 15. I don't know if you know what the ANSI art scene is or BBS.
No. Share that for the audience.
So there's groups like Acid, ICE, Chaos, Relic. These are all groups that made ANSI art for bulletin board systems, menus. When you log in, you'd see all this. Yeah. And also they would do you've seen like crack throws and intros where it's music, a little scrolling thing on the bottom, and then a little image. A lot of that kind of stuff too is done. And so that was like a whole separate subculture. But yeah, I've been interested in tech my entire life, especially coding.
Okay.
So I think that kind of was in the background throughout this whole thing.
Interesting. Did you create any notable ASCII art that we know or we might recognize?
If you go to textfiles.com, if you look for the Atomic Art Pack of 1993, there's an ANSI art viewer written by. Oh, you have to run it in DOSBox, by the way. That's how old it is. But it's written by somebody named Mindwarp, and that was me.
Oh, okay. Well,
so
definitely.
Viewer, yeah.
Definitely go check that out. So as we start
Right.
to welcome individuals onto the stream, we're streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. If you are on LinkedIn, make sure that you follow myself, you follow Jeff Barron, as well as all the other amazing guests that we have. If you're joining us from YouTube, make sure you hit subscribe, hit that notification button. That way, next time we pop up, you get that notification. And we have our first guest comment from today. From Christopher Frazier. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Chris. Thank you for the stream. So let's get into this.
I'm glad to have you, man.
What made you want to move away from the event promotion scene?
Well, by the time I turned 25 or so when you're in this, so basically, yes. So it can be kind of strange to live your life at nightclubs. And so when you're promoting, especially back then, no social media, no cell phones. So you're putting flyers in people's hands. You're in parking lots every single night, almost every single night. You might get some days during the week off, but every weekend you're working really long hours. I was completely nocturnal back then. Sometimes I'd wake up at, 5 or 6. I'd go to sleep at 5 or 6 in the morning. Wake up, 3 o'clock that day and do it all over again. So it's hard to sustain that, especially when you meet somebody who already has children and you think maybe this isn't conducive for the next phase of my life, which was raising my stepdaughters. They would turn out to be. I couldn't be at the club all night and figure out that I could make a move into something else. So it was more family friendly.
Absolutely, that totally makes sense. So what did you move into next?
I went into IT.
Okay.
I did a lot of PC repair. I was a field service technician for many years, where I'd come to your home, basically reboot your router for you, or install Wi-Fi, or do network drops, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I did that for quite a few years.
And was that the shift before you went to security?
It was not actually.
Okay.
I mean, I did that a little bit, but I really didn't love it. It was a lot of driving. I don't like driving at all. So what I had been into and what I thought I wanted to do most of my life was be a game developer. And so I met some friends on SourceForge, and they had this open source project called Snowballs, which cool enough, you can still apt-get install this project. It still runs.
Oh, nice.
It's in all the repositories and Ubuntu and everywhere else. Yeah, hundreds of thousands of downloads. So that's kind of cool. But I met this team and we worked together on this project, and it was really fun. And so I thought, well, and one of the guys also on the team, we decided to create a business together. And that business, we started developing that, and that's what I had done the prior 6 years before I came into cybersecurity, which I've been in almost 3 years now.
Okay, so another quick question from the audience. Jeff is asking, what your background in coding, what are some of the new platforms that you recommend to learn for coding? For example, W3 School, or any other recommendations for those looking to come from the coding side?
That's a great question. Here's the thing. If you can learn, C is not a fun language depending on what you're doing. It can be fun. But you would absolutely should learn Python, no matter where you learn it or what for. There's a free online book called Automate the Boring Stuff with Python. It's really a lot of fun. I would definitely look into that. There's tons of resources online. Get Python. That's kind of going to be your glue for everything. Mm-hmm. If you want to understand exploit development and get into that kind of jam, it's really crucial to understand how stacks and heaps work. And you can learn that by just doing like a couple week tutorial on C coding. Learn how to compile. Learn what does that mean. There's a ton of sources online for that stuff. You don't have to pay for any of it. This is not new material.
Yeah.
And it really will help you understand though, like, well, what is a buffer overflow and what does that even mean, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what's a buffer? You can answer those questions, and that'll put you ahead of 99% of the other people out there.
Absolutely. And so you're doing your IT work. You mentioned there's a lot of driving. Right. For those that are in IT right now, except for the driving, what are some of the transferable skills that you learned that either drove your passion to cybersecurity or made you really want to transition, and how are you utilizing them now?
Well, one thing is just being a solid systems administrator is going to help you, and no matter what you do in cybersecurity, just having a passion of learning. Even in IT and cybersecurity together, these are fields where you have to learn all the time, just consistent learning all the time. And there's always going to be something new, and you got to adapt to that. But what happens though is after you start learning, you see there's patterns, right? There's ways of thinking, ways of problem solving that kind of go across into game dev, IT, and cybersecurity. And it's these patterns that you'll start seeing more and more and more as you develop as a professional. And those are the transferable skills, whether it's understanding how networks tend to work, or like the new hotness, cloud, whatever. Like you see, that seems weird. It seems weird because you saw like the old product 20 years ago, and that seemed weird too. And it's actually the same bug because everything's new again, right?
Absolutely. So what is old? What is old is new again. So
right. I mean,
I was going to say, for someone that's been on the scene so long, what are some of those examples that you remember from back in the day and you're still here today?
So when I was a kid, there weren't passwords on many machines. Like, most universities were totally okay with you using the system as long as you didn't mess it up. They're totally fine with it. The system admins will tell you it's totally fine, you can use it. Just don't break anything. But these systems were like these massively shared systems, mm-hmm. And you could log into them and maybe telnet here, maybe check out IRC, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And then everything changed and everybody had personal computers. And now we're back to this cloud model. And I swear I wouldn't be surprised if things go back to on-prem again. Like that would not shock me. Or some kind of hybrid.
I could tell you that startup companies tend to start in the cloud, but then, for example, take Netflix. They mm-hmm. scaled so large that they ended up bringing it back on-prem.
Right.
So I really think it depends on your business model. So
yeah, sure.
So with regards to your transition into cybersecurity, like, what was that like? What made you want to go into cybersecurity?
So it's kind of a personal story. I guess that's why I'm here.
Absolutely.
My indie game dev business, let me just say it straight. I was terrible at indie game dev, like god awful. There's this one game, you can Google it right now, Steel Storm Ammo. I think it's like a 50 something on Metacritic. It was that bad. But the thing is, you have to work so long just to get something, and then for it to fail, it can be very disheartening. And you really have to work hard at this stuff. But my business failed, and so I was looking at, oh, what should I do now? And I've been interested in cybersecurity and things of that nature for most of my entire life. I used to organize 2600 meetings when I was 12. Actually, the last meeting I went to was the one I was at when I was 12, Tanglewood Mall, Roanoke, Virginia. If anybody is out there remembers that one. Anyhow, cybersecurity. Lost my train of thought.
What got you into cybersecurity? Your business failed, so
right,
you're looking at other options.
Cool. So business failed, and I happened to look at this newspaper, and there's an ad for a cybersecurity degree program at my local university, and I was like, well, I didn't even have that program. And so I went up there and talked to them, and it seemed pretty cool. And I was like, I can knock this out in like 2 years and be done, and just see what happens. And so I did. And so I went there and I started talking to people. I started talking to professors and stuff. A lot of them really weren't that well versed in things, except for one man who really seemed to know his stuff. He was a big influence on me. And what really helped me though was joining the extracurricular groups. There's a group called AITP here in Atlanta, and I joined that group and started meeting people there, other students. And I met this one student who told me about B-Sides, and I had never heard of B-Sides before. And so I went to B-Sides, and that's how I actually met the company I work for now. Oh, yes. B-Sides is a wonderful organization. I always felt like I wasn't good enough to be in cybersecurity. I think that's what kept me from it for so long. It's like I always felt like I wasn't smart enough, wasn't good enough. Like, these guys are like way smarter, I'll never be able to be successful in this field. But I was like, you know what, I'll just give it a shot, start putting my feet in, see what happens, start talking to people. And I didn't realize how friendly, B-Sides especially, I can't say enough about them. The people there were so insanely friendly, so incredibly great. And I started meeting people, and I was like, well, heck, maybe they'll let me let me stay around, And I met a lot of folks there, including my current boss, who would eventually hire me. But at the time, I had no idea that would ever happen. I just saw their demo and shook their hands. Like, man, these guys are cool.
Well, let's talk about that transition. So you did the school. What was it? A boot camp? What was it really?
No, it was a little 2-year associate's degree program.
Okay. Yeah. And would you say it was hands-on, more theoretical? How would you rate that?
It was definitely hands-on. We put Kali on Raspberry Pis. We popped Wi-Fi. It was actually pretty cool.
Okay. So you finished that 2-year program. Did you start applying while you were in the program, or did you wait until?
I did. I ended up applying to several places. The only people I heard back from at first was a recruiter for SecureWorks. And I did a couple of video interviews with them, but by the time they wanted me to come in for a final interview, I'd already been hired at my current company.
Okay. Well, this question from the audience kind of lends to that. What was the most challenging issue that you faced when you were trying to get your first job as a pen tester?
Well, that's a tough question. It's really hard. So for me, I started at this company as a security analyst. I was watching dashboards, alerting clients, that sort of thing. But they had an offensive security team in place already, and so I was talking to those guys, and they also knew that was my dream. That was my dream job, and so I made that very loud. And on the side, like, I'm practicing, vulnerable VMs, Hack the Box, Try Hack Me. These are great resources that will teach you how to do it. I mean, the basic process is pretty simple. When you actually get in the job, it's actually a lot different than you might think. But
how so?
So the basic job of pen testing, right, is you find the service. Is it vulnerable? Yes. Exploit it. Go from there. But the value you bring to clients is this report, this massively long report that they don't tell you about, when hackers are cool, talks and stuff, you have this massively long report with screenshots. It has to be very detailed because that's the only value you're really giving them. The company, the client doesn't care if you popped a shell on them. They care about how to fix their environment and what are the true problems there. And are there problems that don't even involve exploits? Like I had a client that had 30 domain administrators. That's a really big problem, but you're not going to find that with any scans or anything. You have to actually, penetrate the network and then start looking at, well, who are the domain admins so I can steal their credentials. You're like, oh gosh, they have 30 of them. Well, this is going to be a lot easier.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about that. So you mentioned you're doing like Hack the Box. You're doing things extracurricular. So that's one of the things that we always talk about. Like you get your foot in the door one way, and then you do things that show why you're of value. How hard was it to transition from that analyst role to the pen testing role within that organization?
And this one, it was actually fairly easy. I would volunteer. Like, hey, I would ask a lot of questions. I would ask my coworkers who are doing my role now. I was like, well, what tools do you use? So like, or why did you do this that way? I would read the reports that they would send to clients. Like, hey, is it okay if I read this report? And he's like, yeah, it's fine. And I'd read the report and see like, well, what does this finding even mean? Like, what does this even mean, right? And because we always have recommendations in all the findings as well. And so I would ask people like, well, why did you recommend this instead of that? I asked a bunch of questions. That's what my key is: communicating, talking, and learning. People will tell you it's not. This is a lot of people think like being a pen tester is some unattainable goal or some magic. You got it like you're a wizard or something. It's not true. It's very teachable. Anybody can learn it. It just takes time and persistence. I would say persistence is the #1 key to getting this role.
Okay. So you had a lot of persistence. You asked a lot of questions. When you first got into the role, you mentioned that it wasn't like you've experienced it in the Hack the Box, the other things. Like, how different is it in real life versus some of the games, or are the games maybe similar to real life minus all the detailed reporting that you have to do?
The games are similar. Funny enough, in some aspects, the games are harder, sadly, than real life. Cause they really are. A lot of pen testers will call it something CTF. There's a very famous certification, the OSCP. A lot of professional pen testers complain that it feels too much like a CTF versus the real world. Whereas in the real world, you have no limits on the tools you can use or the attacks you can employ. There are those for that certification. So the vulnerable VMs and the hack the boxes and stuff, they tend to be focused on one specific task, but they tend to be more like a puzzle than what you're traditionally going to find, like default configurations. There might be, but it might be that. It might be once you get inside, you have to escalate privileges by grepping through every text file on the Linux box and finding that random SSH key that somebody forgot about. That typically is not my experience. I've never seen, sadly, a Linux box that I've been able to pop. I had a Raspberry Pi that somebody was running Pi-hole, the DNS software on. And I tried popping it, but I didn't. And like the other exploit that I had that I didn't try, I was like, I feel like a real jerk if I crash this guy's Pi-hole. And that's actually another thing about pen testing is the discipline you have to have. Like with the CTF and with vulnerable VMs, you have this rush of awesome, I solved the puzzle, and you get that dopamine hit of I figured it out. But you have to be careful with that because when you're live firing exploits at a client, you don't want to disrupt their business and cause, you don't want to be basically the ransomware folk, right?
Exactly.
You don't want to disrupt their business because you can cost them a lot of money, and it'll be all your fault too, by the way.
So one of the comments mentioned from Mufasa, you're the wizard, Jeff. Hagrid whispered. One of the other questions is, with all the learning you had, one thing you wish that was actually thought for the jobs or career for cybersecurity, for example, how to write a report. What else would you say would be one thing that you wish that your program taught you?
I feel like the program was really lacking on Linux. I can't emphasize this enough. You have to know Linux backwards and forwards. There's a great online resource called Over the Wire, overthewire.com. You can go over there, and by the way, like those puzzles get really tough, but it kind of gets you in the mindset if you haven't used Linux before, if you're trying to get used to the commands and stuff. Actually, our intern here is currently tasked with those Over the Wire challenges. So I think that's a great way to learn it. But Linux, you have to know it. Just live in it. That's what I would recommend. Is just quit Windows altogether. You'll have to learn Windows again, but it'll be from the command line. I mean, there's a ton of resources out there. But what's the one thing? I wish I'd known, or wish somebody had simply told me, "You're good enough. You can do this. There's a path. This is learnable. You can study it. It's out there. You just if you have questions, ask them." That's it. I wish somebody had told me, just speak up and ask somebody.
Yeah. So one of the things you mentioned earlier was OSCP and certifications.
Mm-hmm.
In your associate's program, did you get any certifications as part of that process, or
No,
did you get any individually before you got your first role?
I already had some CompTIA certifications, Sec Plus, Net Plus, A Plus, Project Plus, and I have Microsoft certifications going back 20 before this millennium. So, but I mean, they're not actually transferable at all. They're like Windows NT. That's not really a. I don't.
Hopefully, it's not a thing these days.
That's another thing. If you find something, so recently I found a Windows 2000 box on a client's network, and there's like 10 different ways I could have popped it, but I didn't pop it. Do you know why? I figure there's got to be a good reason they have this Windows 2000 box in this network that's otherwise okay.
Mm-hmm.
When I talked to the client later, it turned out it was some kind of command and control for some like very serious, I don't think it was some SCADA system, but something along those lines. Something that would have been really bad had it crashed because I wanted to get the shell.
Yeah. That would be pretty bad. So, well, let's talk about that. When you're in your pen testing roles, how do you think about like the business impacts of what you're trying to do to create that report to show their vulnerabilities, and assessing whether it's worth going down that route to show them the risk versus saying, hey, this is a potential vulnerability that you had, but I didn't want to exploit it for these reasons, and then still being able to sell that as a risk to the organization.
Right. So what I do is I will test for the vulnerability, and if I believe that, so let me backtrack. If I find a vulnerability, and it's one that I'm used to and I'm familiar with it, I already know what the OS is, I already know all that, then maybe I exploit it. But if I have any blanks, if I'm not sure, if I'm not familiar with the particular exploit, if I look at the the POC code that I grab off GitHub and I'm not quite sure what that Python code's trying to do, I'm not going to fire it. But I will report it as a finding. I just will put in my report, it's like I did not feel comfortable running this exploit because I didn't want to disrupt the business. And I think that's important. What matters is fixing those vulnerabilities more than me like feeling like I'm cool for popping a Windows 2000 box of the 19-year-old exploit, right? It's kind of something. It's an art, like you make a judgment, and you have to stand by it. You have to take total ownership of those judgments.
So one of the questions from the audience members is, in your interview process, I hear a lot of people stumbling on technical questions. What kind of breadth or depth of questions came up in the security analyst role or in looking to transfer over?
Okay, so I'd say for security analysts, what we're really looking for is people that know like network plus, like basic networking. You don't have to be a CCNA, but you should know what a VLAN is. Even if you don't, you might still be all right. As far as the technical questions go, it's going to be basic networking. Do you understand IP addresses? Do you understand an internal environment versus an external environment? Do you know what a firewall is? Pretty basic questions. So So we know that when you're looking at these reports, you'll understand, what they mean and what could be bad. There's a lot of on-the-job training. Well, and I imagine it's that way with any company because there's so many vendors out there, so many different products. I can tell you, you're gonna be looking at a lot of dashboards, a lot of reports. That's for sure. But yeah, basic networking, basic sysadmin. But yeah, I would say like networking most of all will help you understand everything else.
Okay. This is an interesting question from Christopher. Do you have any recommendations for books to learn more the business lingo so you don't sound too technical?
Honestly, I wish I did. And if you find some, send them my way because it's something I truly struggle with, translating tech talk into business speak. It's something I've really been trying to work on lately. I've been reading like leadership books. I just transitioned to a management role. Was not in management before at all. And so I'm trying to read leadership books. But this awesome book called Extreme Ownership. I think it's a cool book for everybody. It's kind of an entertaining book. But he's identified correctly. One of the hardest problems in cybersecurity is how to make business people understand the risk and understand the value of paying all this money for cybersecurity. It really is an investment in your protection of yourself. It's expensive to have a defense, but you have to have one. And
Yeah, I have some recommendations there. So look at a book list called a Cybersecurity Canon book list, and
Okay.
you'll find some from Kevin Mitnick and other people like that, but you also find like the other known cybersecurity professionals that write cybersecurity for general public, and
Oh,
you'll
okay.
read it and find that it's too easy for you, but they translate the technical terms for everyone in a very easy way. So in reading those
Oh, wow.
books, you can understand like what I did a lot, and I
Mhm.
have a whole book list of like understanding information security from like the CIA operators and how they
Mhm.
translated what they did, or the history in different like attacks, and they write it for non-technical people to understand how those events go. So by reading it from that perspective, you can go, oh well, I understand how it works in the back end, but here's how it was translated into plain English, so to speak. So that might be one approach.
I will definitely look into that because that's one of my current challenges right now is that very thing. And like,
So
yeah, like anybody who can conquer that challenge, they're going to go really far in this business.
absolutely. So you're one. I hate to ask this question in this way, but it's
Okay.
something that we talk about on CISO Thursday. Past couple weeks, you did a mid-career transition into
Yes.
cybersecurity. Do you feel that you faced ageism or you experience ageism in the industry? And how would you tackle, how would you recommend individuals that might be looking to do such a transition to tackle anything that you might have experienced close to that?
Right. So I would say that's definitely out there. I know my own insecurities made me maybe sometimes see it was there when it maybe wasn't then. And sometimes you'll hear jokes and stuff from people talking, and they mean it politely, I guess. But if you're a little bit older, it might rub you the wrong way. I would say just have a thick skin and go for it. I mean, what's the alternative? It didn't hinder me at all, and I don't think it'll hinder you. I certainly would not look at age as a barrier for working for me ever. But I do understand that in the tech business, it can be very common. But I would say go for it.
Okay. In your day job, you're a director, so you're one of the more senior people that
Mhm.
we've had on the show, minus some of the CISOs on CISO Thursdays. As you're looking to hire the next generation of those individuals looking to break in, or anyone looking to transition in, what do you look for when you hire individuals?
A willingness to learn, passion. I want to see somebody that's passionate about this, and I want to see somebody that has a willingness to learn, who will, if I say, hey, I have 20 people on Twitter, I need you to follow, they will do it. That's the kind of commitment that I'm really looking for. Because if you'll just listen, like I can put you on a path and get you to where you want to go. But and that path, it's not like I'm micromanaging at all, but there's there's a lot of stuff that's outside of the job, like Twitter. You need to follow like all these people. You got to know who Dirkjan is, and maybe have a notification when he sends out a tweet, because that researcher is amazing. And there's a ton of other amazing researchers that you need to be following. As far as other things, I would encourage them to volunteer work. And as far as cybersecurity goes, there's a lot of cool stuff in that regards. I personally volunteer for a group called the CTI League. Really great group, really good people there.
Okay, perfect. Well, we're over our half-hour mark, but I just wanted to continue the conversation because it was so juicy.
Sure.
The last question I typically ask is, if you had to summarize everything that you experienced and what you went through as one piece of advice for those looking to follow in your footsteps, what would that be? One piece of advice.
Never stop learning and never give up. Just never stop learning. Keep learning. Learn everything. Read everything. Why not? I had a lot of free time during the transition between indie game dev and going back to school, and I just read everything all the time. And I dropped out of college to pursue my rave promotion stuff, and I always felt less than. I always felt like I was dumber than everybody else because I dropped out of college. So I always, every chance I could, I read everything I could find. Always on all subjects too. By the way, to be like really good at cybersecurity, you don't necessarily need a computer. Like, you need that computer science background. I would say IT background, but there's a lot of stuff like philosophy and the social sciences that can be extremely helpful with what the issues we deal with every day.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for that. I personally believe in CI/CD, and that is continuous learning, continuous development. I myself always promote that. Thank you so much for your time. Those individuals following us on LinkedIn, ensure you follow Jeff, ensure you follow me, our other co-hosts, our other guests. If you're following us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification button. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, don't forget to share with others. That's how we could get more diverse individuals into this field. We need diversity of thought, diversity of experience, and diversity of background. We're not just talking gender. We're not just talking skin color. We're talking everything. We need diversity of everything in this field. So share with as many people as you like. Get them all coming in. Jeff, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.